city-raising sun, I would all honor show. This heard, his charge she seemed to intend, and to Olympus flew. But as the mind of such a man that hath But as the mind of such a man that hath a great way gone. But as the mind of such a man that hath a great way gone, and either knowing not his way, or then would let alone his purposed journey, is distract, and in his vexed and in his vexed mind resolves now not to go, now goes, still many ways inclined. So reverend Juno headlong flew, and 'gainst her stomach strived, for being amongst the immortal gods in high heaven soon arrived, and 'gainst her stomach strived, for being amongst the immortal gods in high heaven soon arrived, all rising, welcoming with cups her little absence thence, she all their courtships overpassed with solemn negligence, save that which fair-cheeked Themis showed, and her kind cup she took. For first she ran and met with her, and asked, what troubled look she... Let's make a note for Themis. Themis, most would probably pronounce Themis or Themis. But I'm using the Homeric pronunciation style where it would use the, I don't know what the letter is called, but it's pronounced like a te. Whereas in later ancient Greek, it would be pronounced like a the. Themis, and this is in 6 minutes. What troubled look she brought to heaven, and met with her, and her kind cup she took, and met with her, and asked, what troubled look she brought to heaven? She thought, for truth, that Jove had terrified her spirits. What troubled look she brought to heaven? She thought, for truth, that Jove had terrified her spirits strangely since she went. The fair-armed queen replied, all right, let's pull in Juno. Okay, who else are we going to need for this one? Apollo, Iris, Neptune, Hector, because Apollo talks to Hector. Let's say that's good for now. Probably Ajax. Oh yeah, Ajax is going to be in there. Greater Ajax, at least. But let's call in Juno's voice. Who was that, thou craftiest counselor of all the gods? The fair-armed queen replied, that truth may easily be supposed. You, goddess Themis, know his old severity and pride, but you bear it out. That truth may easily be supposed. You, goddess Themis, know his old severity and pride, but you bear it out. But you bear it out with show, and like the banquet's arbiter amongst the immortals fair. Though well amongst the immortals fair. But you bear it out with show, and like the banquet's arbiter amongst the immortals fair, though well you hear amongst them all how bad his actions are, nor are all here, nor anywhere mortals, nor gods, I fear, entirely pleased with what he does, though thus ye banquet here. Entirely pleased with what he does, and thus ye banquet here. With what he does, though thus ye banquet here. Thus took she place displeasedly, the feast in general, bewraying privy spleens at Jove, and then to colour all she laughed, but merely from her lips, for over her black brows her still bent forehead was not cleared. Yet this her passion's throes brought forth in sprite, and we're gonna need Minerva too in a second. Let's pull her in. But not yet. Yet this her passion's throes brought forth in spite, being lately schooled. Her black brows still bent forward. Forehead was not cleared. Yet this her passion's throes brought forth in spite, being lately schooled. Alas, what fools are we! That envy Jove, or that by act, word, thought, can fantasy any resistance to his will. He sits far off, nor cares, nor moves, but says he knows his strength, to all degrees compares his greatness past all other gods, and that in fortitude and every other godlike power he reigns past all endued. For which great eminence all you gods, whatever ill he does, sustain with patience. Here is Mars, I think, not free from woes, and every other godlike power he reigns past all endued. For which great eminence all you gods, whatever ill he does, sustain with patience. Here is Mars, I think, not free from woes, and yet he bears them like himself. The great god had a son, whom he himself yet justifies, one that from all men won just surname of their best beloved. Ascalaphus. One that from all men won just surname of their best beloved. Ascalaphus. Yet he by Jove's high grace to Troy is slain. Mars started horribly. Ascalaphus. Yet he, by Jove's high grace to Troy, is slain. Mars started horribly, as Juno knew he would at this, beat with his hurled out hands his brawny thighs, cried out and said, I forgot to pull in Mars. O Priam's sons! His brawny thighs cried out and said, O you that have commands in these high temples, bear with me if I revenge the death of such a son. I'll to the fleet, and though I sink beneath the fate of being shot to hell by Jove's fell thunderstone, and lie all grimed amongst the dead, amongst the dead with dust and blood. My son, revenge shall honor. My son, revenge shall honor. Then he charged fear and dismay to join his horse and chariot. He got arms that over heaven did shine. Chariot. He got arms that over heaven did shine. And then a wrath more great and grave in Jove had been prepared against the gods. Great and grave in Jove had been prepared against the gods than Juno caused, if Pallas had not cared more for the peace of heaven than Mars, who leapt out of her had been prepared against the gods than Juno caused, if Pallas had not cared more for the peace of heaven than Mars, who leapt out of her throne, wrapped up her helmet, lance, and shield, and made her fane's porch groan with her aggression to his stay, and thus his rage defers. With her aggression to his stay, and thus his rage defers. Okay, Minerva, we already have this pulled in. I am sent from Juno, whose effects... Thus his rage defers. Furious and foolish, thou'rt undone. Furious and foolish, thou'rt undone. Hast thou for naught thine ears? Heardst thou not Juno being arrived from heaven's great king, but now? Arrived from heaven's great king, but now? Or wouldst thou he himself should rise, forced with thy rage, to show the dreadful power she urged in him, so justly being stirred? No, thou most impudent and mad. No, thou most impudent and mad, thy wrath had not inferred mischief to thee, but to us all. His spirit had instantly left both the hosts and turned his hands to uproars in the sky, guiltly and guiltless both to rack in his high rage, and gone. And therefore, as thou lovest thyself, cease fury for thy son. Another, far exceeding him in heart and strength of hand, or is, or will be shortly slain. It were a work would stand, or will be shortly slain. Or is, or will be shortly slain. It were a work would shortly slain. It were a work would stand Jove in much trouble to free all from death that would not die. Much trouble to free all from death that would not die. This threat even nailed him to his throne, would not die. This threat even nailed him to his throne, when heaven's chief majesty called. This threat even nailed him to his throne, when heaven's chief majesty called bright Apollo from his fane, and Iris that had place of internuncius? We gotta check this one. It is an archaic English word meaning a messenger, go-between, or intermediary. Internuncius. Oh, internuncius, like a murderess. It's a female version of a word. So an internancy would be the male one. I don't know, or the general one. Let's add it to the pronunciation guide. Never heard that one. Called bright Apollo. This threat even nailed him to his throne, when heaven's chief majesty called bright Apollo from his fane, and Iris that had place of internuncius from the gods, to whom she did the grace of Jupiter to this effect. Okay, this is actually Juno talking, I think. Yeah, it's Juno. But it doesn't mention that Juno's the one saying it. Or I guess it's saying when heaven's chief majesty called them. You would assume that would be Jove or Jupiter. But I know from other translations it would have been Juno talking there, and it sounds like it's Juno in the dialogue. Who was that, thou craftiest counselor of all? To whom she did the grace of Jupiter to this effect. It is Saturnius' will that both with utmost speed should stoop to the Idalian hill, to know his further pleasure there. And this let me advise, when you arrive and are in reach of his refulgent eyes, his pleasure heard, perform it all, of whatsoever kind. Let's just check this Idalian. With utmost speed should stoop to the Idalian hill, to know his further pleasure there. And this let me advise, when you arrive and are in reach of his refulgent eyes, his pleasure heard, perform it all, of whatsoever kind. Okay. Soever kind. Thus moved she back, and used her throne. Those two outstripped the wind, and Ida, all enchased with springs, they soon attained, and found where far discerning Jupiter in his repose had crowned the brows of Gargarus. Jupiter in his repose had crowned the brows of Gargarus, and wrapped in an odoriferous cloud about his bosom. Coming near, they stood. Nor now he showed his angry countenance, since so soon he saw they made the access that his loved wife enjoined. But first the fair ambassadress he thus commanded. Let's pull in Jupiter. And my power to give it act. Made the access that his loved wife enjoined. But first the fair ambassadress he thus commanded. Iris, go to Neptune, and relate our pleasure truly and at large. Command him from the fate of human war, and either greet the god's society, or the divine sea make his seat. If proudly he deny, let better counsels be his guides than such as bid me war, and tempt my charge. Though he be strong, for I am stronger far, and elder born. Nor let him dare to boast even state with me, whom all gods else prefer in fear. This said, down hasted she from Ida's top to Ilion, and like a mighty snow, or Gelid? All right. Another word I've never heard before. Gelid. Gelid, an English word meaning icy, cold, frozen, or chilled to the bone. Gelid. Maybe gelatin is based on that? I don't know. It's a bit of a stretch. Okay. This said, down hasted she from Ida's top to Ilion. And like a mighty snow or gelid hail, that from the clouds the northern spirit doth blow, so fell the windy-footed dame, and found with quick repair the watery god, to whom she said, Iris, O Priam, thou art always pleased with indiscreet advice. Pausing for a second here because there's some kind of noise happening outside. I'm not sure if it'll pick up on the mic. All right. Okay, so we need to pick up Neptune's voice anyway. Let's see this one. Oh, wait, no, first we're doing Iris. O Priam, thou art always pleased with indiscreet advice, and found with quick repair the watery god, to whom she said, God with the sable hair, I came. God with the sable hair, God with the sable hair, God with the sable hair, I came from aegis-bearing Jove to bid thee cease from fight and visit heaven or the ample seas, which if in his despite or disobedience thou deniest, he threatens thee to come. He threatens thee to come in opposite fight to field himself. In opposite fight to field himself, and therefore warns thee home, his hands eschewing, since his power is far superior, his birth before thee. Since his power is far superior, his birth before thee, and affirms thy loved heart should not abhor to vaunt equality with him whom every deity fears. He answered. Right, now we pull in Neptune. Father of gods, will any man of all earth's... He answered, O unworthy thing! Though he be great, he bears his tongue too proudly, that ourself born to an equal share of state and freedom he would force. 3 brothers born we are to Saturn, Rhea. Rhea brought us forth. Born we are to Saturn. Rhea brought us forth, this Jupiter and I and Pluto. This Jupiter and I and Pluto, god of undergrounds, the world indifferently disposed betwixt us, every one his kingdom. I the seas, Pluto the black lot, Jupiter the principalities of broad heaven, and all Jupiter the principalities of broad heaven, all the sky and cloud of broad heaven, all the sky and clouds was sorted out. The earth and high Olympus common are, and due to either's birth. Why then should I be awed by him? Content he his great heart with his third portion, and not think to amplify his part, with terrors of his stronger hands on me, as if I were the most ignoble of us. As if I were the most ignoble of us all. Let him contain in fear his daughters and his sons, begot by his own person. This holds more convenience. They must hear these violent threats of his. Shall I, said Iris, Shall I, said Iris, bear from thee an answer so austere? Or wilt thou change it, changing minds all noble natures bear, and well thou know'st. Changing minds all noble natures bear, and well thou know'st, these greatest born changing minds all noble natures bear, and well thou knowest, these greatest born the Furies follow still. He answered, Iris. He answered, Iris, thy reply keeps time and shows thy skill. Oh, 'tis a most praiseworthy thing when messengers can tell, besides their messages, such things as fit the occasion well. But this much grieves my heart and soul, that being in power and state always his equal, and so fixed by one decree in fate, he should to me, as under him, ill language give and chide. Yet now, though still incensed, I yield. Yet now, though still incensed, I yield, affirming this beside, and I enforce it with a threat, that if, without consent of me, Minerva, Mercury, the queen of regiment, and Vulcan, he will either spare high Ilion, or not raise her turrets to the lowest stone, and with both these not grace the Greeks as victors absolute, inform him this from me. His pride and my contempt shall live at endless enmity. This said, he left the Greeks, and rushed into his watery throne. Much missed of all the heroic host. When Jove discerned him gone, Apollo's service he employed, and said, and my power to give it act. He employed, and said, Loved Phoebus, go to Hector now. And said, Loved Phoebus, go to Hector. Now the earth-shaking god hath taken sea, and so shrunk from the horrors I denounced, which, standing, he and all the under-seated deities that circle Saturn's fall had heard of me in such a fight as had gone hard for them. But both of them But both for them and me 'tis best that they thus fly. 'Tis best that thus they fly the extreme that had not passed us without sweat. That had not passed us without sweat. That had not passed us without sweat. Now then, in thy hands take my adder-fringed affrighting shield. Take my adder-fringed affrighting shield, with which such terrors shake that fear may shake the Greeks to flight. That fear may shake the Greeks to flight. Beside this, add thy care, O Phoebus, far-off shooting god, that this so sickly fair of famous Hector be recured, and quickly so excite his amplest powers, that all the Greeks may grace him with their flight. Greeks may grace him with their flight, even to their ships and Hellespont. And then will I devise all words and facts again for Greece, that largely may suffice to breathe them from their instant toils. Breathe them from their instant toils. Thus, from the Idaean height, like air's swift pigeon killer. From the Idaean height, like air's swift pigeon killer, stooped the far-shot god of light, and found great Hector sitting up, not stretched upon his bed, nor wheezing with a stooped stopped-up spirit, not in cold sweats, but fed with fresh and comfortable veins, but his mind all his own, but round about him all his friends as well as ever known. And this was with the mind of Jove, that flew to him before Apollo came, who, as he saw no sign of any sore, asked him like a cheerful visitant. As he saw no sign of any sore, asked him to him before Apollo came, who, as he saw no sign of any sore, asked like a cheerful visitant. Okay, Apollo. Oh, I already pulled in Apollo. Turn head, ye well-rowed peers of Troy. Okay, this is more of an angry Apollo. Let's, I think I already did an Apollo not angry voice, but it would have been book 7. I don't want to have to go find that, though. I could just surmise what it would be. I'll make another one. I'll make a note to write this one down. And if the other one doesn't match, then I'll redo that one instead. We'll just call this one Apollo. So that one was turn head, Grecian. So now maybe, why in this sickly kind, great Hector, sittest thou apart? Can any grief of mind invade thy fortitude? All right. Like a cheerful visitant. Why, in this sickly kind, great Hector, sitst thou so apart? Can any grief of mind invade thy fortitude? He spake, but with a feeble voice. Okay, Hector, and let's make him sound feeble. Trojans and hardy Greeks, hear now. With a feeble voice. O thou, the best of deities, why, since I thus rejoice by thy so serious benefit, demand'st thou, as in mirth, and to my face, if I were ill? For more than what thy worth must needs take note of, doth not fame from all the mouths fill their ears? that as my hand at the archive fleet was making massacres of men whom valiant Ajax led, his strength struck with a stone. All Jax led, his strength struck with a stone, all powers of more hurt from my breast. Okay. That's a very complicatedly phrased question. For more than what thy worth must needs take note of, does not fame from all mouths fill their ears, that, as my hand at the archive fleet was making massacres of men whom valiant Ajax led, his strength struck with a stone, all power of more hurt from my breast, all power of more hurt from my breast. My very soul was gone, and once today I thought to see the house of Dis and Death. And once today I thought to see the house of Dis and Death. Dis and Death. Be strong, said he, for such a spirit now sends. Be strong, said he, for such a spirit now sends the god of breath from airy Ida, as shall run through all Greek spirits in thee. Apollo with the golden sword, the clear far seer, see him who betwixt death and thy life, twixt ruin and those towers, ere this day oft hath held his shield. Ruin and those towers, ere this day, betwixt death and thy life, twixt ruin and those towers, ere this day oft hath held his shield. Come then, be all thy powers in wonted vigor. Let thy knights with all their horse essay the Grecian fleet. Myself will lead, and scour so clear the way that flight shall leave no Greek a rub. Thus, instantly inspired, were all his nerves with matchless strength. And then his friends he fired against their foes, when to his eyes his ears confirmed the god. Then as goodly-headed hart or goat bred in the wood, a rout of country huntsmen chase, with all their hounds in cry. The beast yet o'er the shady woods, or rocks excessive high, keep safe, or our unwieldy fates. That, even in hunter's sway, bar them the poor beasts pulling down, when straight the clamorous fray calls out a lion, hugely maned, and his abhorred view turns headlong in unturning flight, though venturous all the crew. So hitherto the chasing Greeks their slaughter dealt by troops. But after Hector But after Hector was beheld range here and there, then stoops the boldest courage. Then their heels took in their dropping hearts, and then spake Andromonides, a man of far best parts of all the Aetolians, skilled in darts, strenuous in fights of stand, and one of whom few of the Greeks could get the better hand for rhetoric when they fought with words, which all which being wise, thus spake he to his Grecian friends. Okay, let's just mark this for Andromonides, which is actually, who would that be? Let's go take a look at that. Son of Andreman, obviously. Thoas, okay. And this is 4330 Thoas. A few of the Greeks could get the better hand for rhetoric when they fought with words, with all which being wise, thus spake he to his Grecian friends. O mischief, now mine eyes discern no little miracle. Hector escaped from death, and all recovered when all thought his soul had sunk beneath the hands of Ajax. But some god hath saved and freed again him that but now dissolved the knees of many a Grecian, and now I fear will weaken more. For not without the hand of him that thunders can his powers thus still the forfight stand, thus still triumphant. Hear me then, our troops in quick retreat, let's draw up to our fleet. And we that boast ourselves the great stand firm, and try if these that raise so high their charging darts may be resisted. I believe even this great heart of hearts will fear himself to be too bold in charging through us. Thorough us. That's a strange usage of that word. Thorough. Okay. It is an antiquated way to say through. All right. Let's add it to the list. I believe even this great heart of hearts will fear himself to be too bold in charging through us. They easily heard him and obeyed when all the generous they called to encounter Hector's charge. And turned the common men back to the fleet. And these were they that bravely furnished then the fierce forefight. The Ajaces both, the worthy Cretan king, the Mars-like Meges, Merion and Teucer, up then bring the Trojan chiefs and their men. Then bring the Trojan chiefs their men in heaps, before whom amply paced. Marched Hector, and in front of him Apollo, who had cast about his bright aspect a cloud, and did before him bear Jove's huge and eachwhere shaggy shield, which to contain and fear offending men the godsmith gave to Jove. With this he led the Trojan forces. The Greeks stood, a fervent the Greeks stood. A fervent clamor spread the air on both sides as they joined. Out as they joined. Out as they joined. Out flew the shafts and darts, some falling short, but others found some found butts and breasts and hearts. As long as Phoebus held but out his horrid shield, so long the darts flew raging either way, and death grew both ways strong. But when the Greeks had seen his face, and who it was that shook the bristled targe, knew by his voice, then all their strength forsook. His voice, then all their strengths forsook their nerves and minds. And then look how a goodly herd of neat or wealthy flock of sheep, being close and dreadless at their meat in some black midnight, suddenly, and not a keeper near, a brace of horrid bears rush in, and then fly here and there the poor affrighted flocks or herds. So every way dispersed the heartless Grecians. So the sun, their headstrong chase reversed to headlong flight. And that day raised with all grace Hector's head. Arcesilaus then he slew, and Stichius led Boeotia's brazen-coated men. The other was the friend of mighty-souled Menesthius. Aeneas brought to end Medon and Jasus. Let's start checking names here. Arcesilaus. Stichius. Okay. Medon. And Jasus. I almost had them all. To end Medon and Jasus. Brought to end Medon and Jasus. Medon was the brother, though but base, of swift Oeliades, and dwelt far from his breeding place in Phylace. The other led the Athenian bands. His sire was Spilus, Bucolus' son. Menesthius did Mecistius. First, let's check the names. Spilus, Bucolus. All right, I'm back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bucolus' son, Mecistius. Polydamas, Echius, Polites, Echius, Agenor, Clonius, Diacous. Is that right? Diacous, I recognize the name. Alexander. Okay, it's good for now. The other led the Athenian bands. His sire was Spilus, Bucolus' son. Mecistius did expire beneath Polydamas' hand. Polites Echius slew. Just at the joining of the hosts. Agenor overthrew Clonius. Bold Diacous felt Alexander's lance. Through Clonius. It struck his shoulder's upper part, and did his head advance quite through his breast, as from the fight he turned him for retreat. While these stood spoiling of the slain, the Greeks found time to get beyond the dike and the undiked pales. All scapes they gladly gained, till all had passed the utmost wall. Necessity so reigned. Then Hector cried out, "Take no spoil, but rush on to the fleet, from whose assault for spoil or flight, if any man I meet, he meets his death. From whose assault for spoil or flight, if any man I meet, he meets his death. Nor in the fire of holy funeral his brothers or his sister's hands shall cast within our wall his loathed body. But without the throats of dogs shall grave his manless limbs. The throats of dogs shall grave his manless limbs." This said, the scourge his forward horses drave through every order, and with him all whipped their chariots on, all threateningly, out-thundering shouts as earth were overthrown. Before them marched Apollo still, and as he marched, digged down without all labor with his feet. The dike, till with his own he filled it to the top, and made way both for man and horse, as broad and long as with a lance, as broad and long as with a lance cast out to try one's force a man could measure. Into this they poured whole troops as fast as numerous. Phoebus still before, for all their haste, still shaking Jove's unvalued shield, and held it up to all. And then, as he had choked their dike, he tumbled down their wall. And look how easily any boy upon the sea-ebbed shore, makes with a little sand a toy, and cares for it no more, but as he raised it childishly, so in his wanton vein, both with his hands and feet, he pulls and spurns it down again. So slight, O Phoebus, thy hands made of that huge Grecian toil, and their late stand so well resolved as easily mad'st recoil. Thus stood they driven up at their fleet. Thus stood they driven up at their fleet, where each heard others' thought, exhorted, passing humbly prayed, and all the Greeks besought, with hands held up to heaven for help. Mongst all the good to help heaven for help. Mongst all the good old man grave Nestor, for his counsels called the Argives' guardian, fell on his aged knees and prayed, and to the starry host stretched out his hands for aid to theirs, of all thus moving most. All right, Nestor. Actually, it might be Agamemnon who's talking now. Okay. It could be either one. Okay, I'm gonna do the speech as both. Actually, no, I could check another translation of the Iliad just to make sure which one's speaking at this point. Because of the way that he phrases it, it could be either of them. Hold on. Let's check book 15. All right. Yep, we had that part. Stripping the men. Okay. Gerania Nestor. It is Nestor who's speaking. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right. Good. O gods, our Greek earth. Fell on his aged knees and prayed, and to the starry host stretched out his hands for aid to theirs, of all thus moving most. O Father Jove, if ever man of all our host did burn fat thighs of oxen or of sheep, for grace of safe return in fruitful Argos, and obtained the bowing of thy head, for promise of his humble prayers. O now remember him, thou merely heavenly, and clear up the foul brows of this dim and cruel day. Do not destroy our zeal. Do not destroy our zeal. Do not destroy our zeal for Trojan pride. For Trojan pride. He prayed, and heaven's great counselor with store of thunder tried his former grace good, and so heard the old man's hearty prayers. The Trojans took Jove's sign for them, and poured out their affairs and much more violence on the Greeks, and thought on the Greeks, and thought on not but fight, and thought on naught on the Greeks, and thought on naught but fight, and thought on naught but fight. And as a huge wave of the Greeks, and thought on naught but fight, and as a huge wave of the sea, and as a huge wave of a sea, swollen to his rudest height, breaks over both sides of a ship, being all urged by the wind, for that's it makes. By the wind, for that's it makes the waves so proud. In such a borne-up kind, the Trojans overgat the wall, and getting in their horse, fought close at fleet, which now the Greeks ascended in their force. Then from their chariots they with darts, the Greeks with bead hooks fought. Kept still aboard for naval fights, their heads with iron wrought in hooks and pikes. Achilles' friend, still while he saw the wall that stood, wrought in hooks and pikes. Achilles' friend, still while he saw the wall while he saw the wall that stood without their fleet afford employment for them all, was never absent from the tent of that man-loving Greek, late hurt Eurypylus, but sate, and every way did seek to spend the sharp time of his wound with all the ease he could in medicines and in kind discourse. But when he might behold the Trojans pass the wall, the Greeks' flight driven, and all in cries. Then he cried out, cast down his hands, and beat with grief his thighs. Beat his grief in thighs. Then, I should have known there would be a Patroclus line here. You know, good father, our great friend is apt. His thighs. Then, O Eurypylus, he cried, now all thy need of me must bear my absence. Now a work of more necessity calls hence, and I must haste to call Achilles to the field. Who knows but God assisting me? Who knows but God assisting me, my words may make him yield. The motion of a friend is strong. The motion of a friend is strong. His feet thus took him thence. The rest stood their enemies firm, but all their violence, though Troy fought there with fewer men, lacked vigor to repel those fewer from their navy's charge. And so that charge as well lacked force to spoil. And so that charge as well lacked force to spoil their fleet or tents. And as a shipwright's lane, disposed by such a hand as learn from the artisan divine, and as a shipwright's line, disposed by such a hand as learn from the artisan divine, the perfect practice of his art, directs or guards so well the naval timber then in frame, that all the laid-on steel can hew no further than may serve to give the timber the end fore-purposed by the skillful right. So both hosts did contend with such a line or law applied to what their steel would gain. At other ships fought other men, but Hector did maintain his quarrel firm at Ajax' ship, and so did both employ about one vessel all their toil, nor could the one destroy the ship with fire, nor force the man, nor that man yet get gone the other from so near his ship, for God had brought him on. But now did Ajax with a dart wound deadly in the breast Cletor, son of Clytius, as he with fire addressed to burn the vessel. As he fell, the brand fell from his hand. Cletor, Clytius. Let's start pulling some names. Lycophron, Mastorides, Ajax, Cythera, Cythera? No, Cythera. Cythera. Oops. Cytherans. Okay. Okay. All right. Fire addressed to burn the vessel. As he fell, the brand fell from his hand. When Hector saw his sister's son lie slaughtered in the sand, he called to all his friends and prayed they would not in that strait forsake his nephew, but maintain about his course the fight, and save it from the spoil of Greece. Then sent he out a lance at Ajax in his nephew's reek, which missed, but made the chance on Lycophron Mastorides, which was the household friend of Ajax, that was the household friend of Ajax, born in Cythera, whom Ajax did defend, being fled to his protection for killing of a man amongst the godlike Cytherans. The vengeful javelin ran quite through his head, above his ear, as he was standing by his fouter. I think I have a pronunciation for that already. Fouter? Foutor. Okay. Above his ear, as he was standing by his foutor, then astern his ship, from whence his ran quite through his head, above his ear, as he was standing by his foutor, then astern his ship, from whence his soul did fly, and to the earth his body fell. The hair stood up on end on Ajax, who to Teucer called his brother, saying, "O friends, the lot is mine." His brother saying, "Friend, our loved consort, whom we brought from Cythera, and graced so like our father, Hector's hand hath made him breathe his last. Where then are all thy death-born shafts, and that unvalued bow? And that unvalued bow Apollo gave thee. And that unvalued bow Apollo gave thee. And that unvalued bow Apollo gave thee. And that unvalued bow Apollo gave thee." Teucer straight his brother's thoughts did know, stood near him, and dispatched a shaft amongst the Trojan fight. It struck Pisenor's goodly son, young Cleitus, the delight of Cleitus? Pisenor's goodly son, young Cleitus, the delight of renowned Polydamas, to bridle in his hand. Renowned Polydamas, the bridle in his hand, and he in his hand, as he was laboring his horse to please the high command of Hector and his Trojan friends, and bring him where the fight made greatest tumult. But his strife for honor in their sight wrought not what sight or wishes helped, for turning back his look, the hollow of his neck, the shaft came singing on, and strook, and down he fell, his horse's back, and hurried through the field, the empty chariot. Panthus' son made all haste, and withheld their loose career, disposing them to Protean? Astynous. Their loose career, disposing them to Protean's son, disposing them to Protean's son, Astynous, with special charge, to keep them ever on and in his sight. So he again amongst the foremost went. At Hector then another shaft incensed Teucer sent, which, had it hit him, sure had hurt, and had it hurt him slain, and had it slain him, which, had it hit him, sure had hurt, and had it hurt him slain, and had it slain him, it had driven all those to Troy again. But Jove's mind was not sleeping now. It waked to Hector's fame and Teucer's infamy himself. Teucer's infamy himself in Teucer's deadly aim, his well-wrought string dissevering, that served his bravest bow. His shaft flew quite another way, his bow the earth did strow. At all which Teucer stood amazed, and to his brother cried. Why, most illustrious king, I being thus forward? Brother cried, O prodigy, without all doubt our angel doth deride the counsels of our fight. He brake a string my hands put on this morning, and was newly made, and well might have set gone 100 arrows, and beside he struck out of my hand the bow Apollo gave. He said, Then, good friend, do not stand more on thy archery, since God, preventer of all grace, desired by Grecians, slights it so. Take therefore in the place a good large lance, and on thy neck a target cast as bright, that without labor at the least, though we prove worser men, Troy may not brag it took our ships. Come, mind our business then. This said, he hasted to his tent, left there his shafts and bow, and then his double shield did on his shoulders throw. Upon his honored head he placed his helmet thickly plumed, and then his strong and well-piled lance in his fair hand assumed, returned and boldly took his place by his great brother's side. When Hector saw his arrows broke, out to his friends he cried, O friends, be yet more comforted. I saw the hands of Jove break the great Grecian archers' shafts. 'Tis easy to approve that Jove's power is direct with men, as well in those set high upon the sudden, and in those depressed as suddenly, and those depressed as suddenly, and those not put in state at all. As now he takes away strength from the Greeks and gives it us, then use it, and essay with joined hands this approached fleet. If any bravely buy his fame or fate with wounds or death, in Jove's name let him die, who for his country suffers death, sustains no shameful thing, His wife in honor shall survive. His progeny shall spring in endless summers, and their roofs with patrimony swell. And all this, though with all their freight, the Greek ships we repel. His friends thus cheered, on the others seeing part. His friends thus cheered. On the other part, strong Ajax stirred his friends. O Greeks. Hold on a sec. Ajax greater. O friends. Stirred his friends. O Greeks, said he, what shame is this, that no man more defends his fame and safety than to live and thus be forced to shrink? Now either save your fleet or die, unless ye vainly think that you can live and they destroyed. Perceives not every ear how Hector heartens up his men, and hath his firebrands here, now ready to inflame our fleet? He doth not bid them dance, that you may take your ease and see, but to the fight advance. No counsel can serve us but this, to mix both hands and hearts, and bear up close. 'Tis much better to expose our utmost parts to one day's certain life or death, than languish in a war so base as this, beat to our ships by our inferiors far. Or death, than languish in a war so base as this, beat to our ships by our inferiors far. Thus roused he up their spirits and strengths. To work then both sides went. When Hector the Phorcensian Duke to fields of darkness sent, fierce Schedius, Pyramedes' son, which... Well, let's check it. Pyramedes, Schedius, Phorcensian. What else we got? Laodamus, Antenor, Silenius, Ippian, Meges, Otis, Crasmus, Dolops, Lampus, Phylides, Lampus, Laomedon, Phylius, Epirus. Okay, I'm going to start forgetting names if I don't start. To work then both sides went, when Hector the Phorcensian Duke to fields of darkness sent, fierce Schedius, Pyramedes' son. Schedius. Darkness sent, fierce Schedius, Pyramedes' son, which Ajax did requite with slaughter of Laodamus, that led the foot to fight, and was Antenor's famous son. Polydamas did end Otis, surnamed Silenius, whom Fidus? Oh, I didn't put a pronunciation for Fidus. Fidus? Fidus. Pyrdas in ancient Greek. I'd say Fidus. Otis, surnamed Silenius, whom Fidus made his friend. Being chief, made his friend, being chief of the Epeians' bands. Epeian? See, I'm starting. I tried to remember so many names that I'm forgetting. Epean. Being chief of the Epeans' bands, whose fall when Meges viewed, he let fly at his feller's life, who, shrinking in, eschewed the well-aimed lance. Apollo's will denied that Panthus' son should fall amidst the foremost fights. The dart the mid-breast won of Crasmus, Meges won his arms. At Meges, Dolops then bestowed his lance. He was the son of Lampus, best of men, and Lampus of Laomedon, well skilled in strength of mind. He struck Phylides' shield quite through, whose cuirass better lined and hollowed fitly saved his life. Phyleus left him then, who from Epirus brought them home. On that part where the stream of fair Selles doth run, Euphetes did bestow, being guest with him, those well-proved arms to wear against the foe, and now they saved his son from death. Euphetes, Selles, Epirus. Okay. Son from death. At Dolops, Meges threw a spear well piled, that struck his casque full in the height. Off flew his purple feather, newly made, and in the dust it fell. While these strived for victory, and either's hope served well, Atrides came to Meges' aid, and hidden with his side, let loose a javelin at his foe, that through his back implied his lusty head, even past his breast, the ground received his weight. While these made in to spoil his arms, great Hector did excite all his allies to quick revenge, and first he wrought upon strong Melanippus. I always get that wrong. He wrought upon strong no. This is a typo. It is Melanippus, but in this edition of Chapman's Iliad, it's written as Menalippus. I'm glad I recognized that. When I was writing the guide, I remember noticing that. Hold on a second. Yeah, I stupidly recognized it and then wrote it the wrong way anyway. Well, I'm glad I remembered it now. Melanippus. That was very stupid of me. Melanippus. Yeah, because I remember looking at that and saying, I don't remember a character named Menalippus. Hikateon. Okay. Where are we here? All right. First he wrought upon strong Melanippus. While these made in to spoil his arms, great Hector did excite all his allies to quick revenge. And first he wrought upon strong Damn, because I'm seeing it on the page, I'm saying it the wrong way. And first he wrought upon strong Melanippus. And first he wrought upon strong Melanippus, that was son to great Hikateon. With some reproof. Before these wars he in Percote fed cloven foot In Percote fed, cloven-footed oxen, but did since return where he was bred, excelled amongst the Ilians, was much proof of Priam loved, and in his court kept as his son. Kept as his son. Him Hector thus reproved. Him Hector thus reproved. You know, it looks like Chapman wrote it wrong every time, which makes me think I guess at some level that's an intentional choice, but that's simply not the character's name. He's just arbitrarily writing a different. Yeah, on Wikipedia, if you search Menalippus, it comes up with Melanippus. It can't be Menalippus. I'm just going to correct that. Trojans and hardy Greeks. Hector thus reproved. Thus, Melanippus, shall our blood accuse us of neglect? Nor moves it thy loved heart thus urged thy kinsman to protect? Nor moves it thy loved heart thus urged thy kinsman to protect? Seest thou not how they seek his spoil? Seest thou not how they seek his spoil? Come, follow, now no more our fight must stand at length, but close, for leave the close. But close, nor leave the close before we close the latest eye of them, or they the lowest stone tear up, and sack the citizens of lofty Ilion. He led and followed. He followed like a god. And then must Ajax needs, as well as Hector, cheer his men, and thus their spirits he feeds. Oh, friends, the lot is mine, which to my... Unfortunately, I made Ajax and Hector slightly too similar in voice, I think, but it's fine. I should have thought about how many times Ajax fights or talks to Hector. But in an audiobook, it doesn't matter that much if the voices are relatively similar, because the scene direction is telling you who's speaking. Okay, let's go here. And thus their spirits he feeds. Good friends, bring out yourselves to feel the noble... Good friends, bring but yourselves to feel the noble stings of shame for what ye suffer, and be men. Respect each other's fame. Respect each other's fame, for which who strives. Fame, for which who strives in shame's fit fear, and puts on ne'er so far, comes oftener off. Then stick engaged. These fugitives of war save neither life nor get renown, nor bear more mind than sheep. This short speech fired them in his aid. His spirit touched them deep, and turned them all before the fleet into a wall of brass, to whose assault Jove stirred their foes. And young Atrides was Jove's instrument, who thus set on the young Antilochus. All right, let's pull in Menelaus. Now also give me ear, whom grief gives most cause. Jove's instrument, who thus set on the young Antilochus. Antilochus, in all our host there is not one of us more young than you, more swift of foot, There is not one of us more young than you, more swift of foot, nor with both those so strong. Oh, wouldst thou wouldst then, for thou canst one of this lusty throng that thus comes skipping out before, whoever anywhere make stick for my sake twixt both the hosts and leave his bold blood there. That's a tongue twister. Swift of foot, nor with both those so strong. Oh, wouldst then, for thou canst, one of this lusty throng that thus comes skipping out before, whoever anywhere makes stick for my sake twixt both hosts and leave his bold blood there. Twixt both hosts and leave his bold blood there, and leave his bold blood there. He said no sooner and retired, but forth he rushed before the foremost fighters. Yet his eye did every way explore for doubt of odds. Out flew his lance. The Trojans did abstain where he was darting. Yet his dart he cast not off in vain. For Melanippus, that rare son of great Hicetaon, as bravely as he put forth to fight, it fiercely flew upon, and at the nipple of his breast and life did part. And then, much like an eager hound, cast off at some young hart, hurt by the hunter that had left his covert then, but knew the great in war Antilochus, O Melanippus, flew on thy torn bosom for thy spoil. But thy death could not lie hid to great Hector, who all haste made to thee, and made fly Antilochus, although in war he were at all parts skilled. But as some wild beast, having done some shrewd turn, either killed the herdsman or the herdsman's dog, and skulks away before the gathered multitude makes in, so Nestor's son forbore, but after him with horrid cries, both Hector and the host showers of tear-thirsty lances poured. Who having armed his breast with all his friends, he turned it then. Then on the ships all Troy, like raw flesh nourished lions, rushed, and knew they did employ their powers to perfect Jove's high will, who still their spirits inflamed, and quenched the Grecians, one renowned, the other often shamed. For Hector's glory still he stood, and ever went about to make him cast the fleet such fire as never should go out. Heard Thetis foul petition, and wished in any wise the splendor of the burning ships might satiate his eyes. From him yet the repulse was then to be on Troy conferred, the honor of it given the Greeks, which thinking on he stirred with such addition of his spirit, the spirit Hector bore to burn the fleet, that of itself was hot enough before. But now he fared like Mars himself, so brandishing his lance, as though the deep shades of a wood a raging fire should glance. Hold on a second. All right, back again. Let's keep going here. All right. which thinking on he stirred, with such addition of his spirit, the spirit Hector bore, to burn the fleet, that of itself was hot enough before. But now he fared like Mars himself, so brandishing his lance as through the deep shades of a wood, a raging fire should glance, held up to all eyes by a hill, about his lips a foam stood, as when the ocean is enraged. His eyes were overcome with fervor, and resembled flames, set off by his dark brows, and from his temples his bright helm abhorred lightning throws for Jove. Okay. And from his temples his bright helm abhorred lightning throws. For Jove from forth the sphere of stars to his state put his own, and all the blaze of both the hosts confined in him alone. And all this was, since after this he had not long to live. This lightning flew before his death, which Pallas was to give a small time thence. And all this was, since after this he had not long to live, this lightning flew before his death, which Pallas was to give a small time thence, and now prepared, beneath the violence of great Pelides. In meantime, his present eminence thought all things under it, and he, still where he saw the stands of greatest strength and bravest armed, there he would prove his hands, or nowhere, offering to break through, but that past all his power, although his will were past all theirs, they stood him like a tower, conjoined so firm that as a rock, exceeding high and great, and standing near the hoary sea, bears many a boisterous threat of high-voiced winds, and bears many a boisterous threat of high-voiced winds and billows huge, belched on it by the storms. So stood the Greeks' great Hector's charge. Nor stirred their battleless forms. He, girt in the fire born for the fleet, still rushed at every troop, and fell upon it like a wave, high raised, that then doth stoop out from the clouds, grows as it stoops with storms, then down doth come, and cuff a ship, when all her sides are hid in brackish foam. Strong gales still raging in her sails, her sailors' minds dismayed, death being but little from their lives. So Jove, like Hector, frayed and plied the Greeks, who knew not what would chance for all their guards. And as the baneful king of beasts leapt into oxen herds, fed in the meadows of a fen exceeding great, the beasts in number infinite, amongst whom their herdsmen wanting breasts to fight with lions for the price of a black ox's life, there for the price of a black ox's life. He there and here jumps, first and last, in his bloodthirsty strife, chased and assaulted, and at length down in the midst goes one, and all the rest spersed through the fen. So now all Greece was gone. So Hector, in a flight from heaven upon the Grecians cast, turned all their backs, yet only one his deadly lance laid fast, brave Mycenaeus Periphes. Cyprius' dearest son. Cyprius. Mycenaeus must be referring to the place where he came from. I didn't even write that one down. Oh, yeah. Oh, all those did such a wisdom guide as all Mycena could not match. So Mycenaeus referring to the fact that he came from Mycenae. Periphes, Cyprius. Eurystheus? Yep. Okay. Only one his deadly lance laid fast, brave Mycenaeus Periphes, Cyprius' dearest son, who of the heavens queen-loved king, great Eurystheus, won the grace to greet in embassy the strength of Hercules, was far superior to his sire in feat, won the grace to greet in embassy, the strength of Hercules, was far superior to his sire in feat, fight, nobleness of all the virtues, and all those did such a wisdom guide as all Mycena could not match. And this man dignified, still making greater his renown, the state of Priam's son. Dignified, still making greater his renown, the state of Priam's son. For his unhappy, hasty foot, as he addressed to run, stuck in the extreme ring of his shield that to his ankles reached, and down he upwards fell, his fall up from the center fetched, a huge sound, with his head and helm, which Hector quickly spied, ran in, and in his worthy breast his lance's head did hide, and slew about him all his friends who could not give him aid. They grieved. They grieved, and of his godlike foe fled so extreme afraid. And now amongst the nearest ships that first were drawn to shore, the Greeks were driven, beneath whose sides behind them and before, and into them they poured themselves, and thence were driven again up to their tents, and there they stood, not daring to maintain their guards more outward, but betwixt the bounds of fear and shame, cheered still each other, when the old man that of the Grecian name was called the Pillar, every man thus by his parents prayed. That must be Nestor, I guess. Or, hold on. Okay, yeah. It's gotta be Nestor. O gods, our Greek earth, thus by his parents prayed. O friends, be men. O friends, be men, and in your minds let other shames be weighed. Know you have friends beside yourselves, possessions, parents, wives, as well as those. Parents, wives, as well those that are dead to you, as well those that are dead to you, as those ye love with lives, all sharing still their good or bad with yours. By these I pray, that are not present, and the more should therefore make ye weigh their miss of you, as yours of them, that you will bravely stand, and this forced flight you have sustained, at length yet countermand. Supplies of good words thus supplied, the deeds and spirit of good words thus supplied, the deeds and spirits of all. And so at last Minerva cleared the cloud that Jove let fall before their eyes. A mighty light flew beaming every way, as well about their ships as where their darts did hottest play. Then saw they Hector great in arms, and his associates, as well all those that then abstained, as those that helped the fates, and all their own fight at the fleet. Nor did it now content Ajax to keep down like the rest. He up the hatches went, stalked here and there, and in his hand a huge great bead hook held 12 cubits long and full of iron. And as a man well skilled in horse made to the martial race, when of a number more he chooseth 4, and brings them forth to run them all before, swarms of admiring citizens amidst their town's high sway, and in their full career he leaps from one to one, no stay enforced on any, nor fails he in either set or leap. So Ajax with his bead hook leaped. So Ajax with his bead hook leaped nimbly from ship to ship, as actively commanding all, them in their men as well as men in them, most terribly exhorting to repel them in their men as well as men in them, most terribly to repel, to save their navy and their tents. But Hector nothing needs to stand on exhortations now at home. He strives for deeds. And look how Jove's great queen of birds, sharp set, looks out for prey, knows floods that nourish wild-winged fowls, and from her airy way beholds where cranes, swans, cormorants have made their bloody fall, darkens the river with her wings, and stoops amongst them all. So Hector flew amongst the Greeks, directing his command in chief against one opposite ship, Jove. Jove with a mighty hand still backing him and all his men. And then again there grew a bitter conflict at the fleet. You would have said none drew a weary breath, nor ever would. They laid so freshly on. And this was it that fired them both. The Greeks did build upon no hope but what the field would yield. Flight, an impossible course. The Trojans all hope entertained that sword and fire should force both ships and fire should force both ships and lives of all the Greeks. And thus, unlike effects, bred like strenuity in both. 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 Great Hector still directs his powers against the first near ship. 'Twas that fair bark that brought Protesilaus to those wars, and now herself to naught, with many Greek and Trojan lives, all spoiled about her spoil. One slew another desperately, and close the deadly toil was pitched on both parts. Not a shaft, nor far-off striking dart was used through all. One fight fell out of one despiteful heart. Sharp axes, twibills, two-hand swords, and spears with two heads born were then the weapons. Fair short swords, with sanguine hilts still worn, had use in like sort, of which last ye might have numbers viewed dropped with dissolved arms from their hands. As many downright hewed from off their shoulders as they fought, their baldricks cut in twain. And thus the black blood flowed on earth from soldiers hurt and slain. When Hector once had seized the ship, he clapped his fair broad hand fast on the stern, and held it there, and there gave this command: Bring fire, and all together shout. Now Jove hath drawn the veil from such a day as makes amends for all his storms of hail, by whose blessed light we take those ships that in despite of heaven took sea and brought us worlds of woe, since our peers were given to such a laziness and fear, they would not let me end our lingering banes, and charge thus home, but kept home and defend, and so they ruled the men I had, and so they ruled the men I led. But though Jove then withheld my natural spirit, now by Jove 'tis freed, and thus impelled. But though Jove then withheld my natural spirit, now by Jove 'tis freed, and thus impelled. This more inflamed them, in so much that Ajax now no more kept up. He inflamed them. In so much that Ajax now no more kept up, he was so drowned in darts. A little he forebore the hatches to a seat beneath. Of 7 foot long, but thought it was impossible to scape. He sat yet where he fought, and hurled out lances thick as hail, at all men that essayed to fire the ship, with whom he found his hands so overlaid that on his soldiers thus he cried: O friends, fight I alone? Expect ye more walls at our backs, towns rampired here are none, no citizens to take ye in, no help in any kind. We are, I tell you, in Troy's fields, have naught but seas behind, and foes before. behind, and foes before, far, far from Greece. For shame, obey commands. There is no mercy in the wars. Your healths lie in your hands. In the wars, your healths lie in your hands. Thus raged he. Thus raged he, and poured out his darts. Whoever he espied, come near the vessel armed with. Thus raged he, and poured out his darts. Whoever he espied, come near the vessel. Whoever he espied, come near the vessel armed with fire. Come near the vessel armed with fire. On his fierce dart he died. He died. All that pleased Hector made him mad, and all his thanks would earn, of which 12 men. Him mad, all that his thanks would earn, of which 12 men his most resolved, of which 12 men his most resolved lay dead before his stern. His most resolved lay dead before his stern. Of which 12 men his most resolved, all that his thanks would earn, of which 12 men his most resolved, of which all that pleased Hector made him mad, all that his thanks would earn, of which 12 men his most resolved lay dead before his stern.